Due to the fact that I've been sick last week, it means that I have a little bit of catching up to do. Now, in my previous video, I talked about COPPA enforcement, YouTube's inadequate handling of the whole situation. So today, to make things a little bit better, I figured I would talk about the launch of Google Stadia. Surely this can't go as poorly as my previous video, now can it? Well, maybe it can, maybe just a little bit. And I know that what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, man, Rurikhan doesn't like cloud gaming, so he must be having a blast watching Google crash and burn with Google Stadia. And from one stance, you are actually correct, because as a consumer, I am not interested in Google Stadia in the slightest. Because quite simply, I don't trust corporations to keep my games in the cloud for perpetuity. This is one of the reasons why I personally prefer still physical media over digital games. And I know that a lot of people are going to call me old man and all this stuff. I've seen it on a lot of my videos. That's fine. Call me whatever the hell you want. Personally, that's just the way that I feel. I like having a disc. I like having a console. We can't really have that on PC anymore because everything's either on Steam or Epic Games Store. You know, that's just the way these things go. But I still like, holding the game in my hand, even though that doesn't really mean much nowadays because games, they get their day one patches. And once the servers go down, when you do play the game, unless you have it already installed in your console, you're going to experience a subpar game because it's not going to have its day one patch. Some games might not even work without their day one patch. It's just the way these things go. But, I'm still clinging on to my old ways. Old man Rurikhan does not want his video games in the cloud. So from that aspect, you are correct. But there's a second aspect to this. And the second aspect is I'm a content creator. And Google Stadia was actually going to be a good thing for a content creator because essentially it was supposed to have, I'm not sure if it has or not, because at the end of the day, I'm over here in Portugal. We don't got no Google Stadia, man. I have to go from the stuff that I've seen online, from the videos that I've seen online where apparently people are reporting that there's a section in Google Stadia for you to insert your AIM messenger handle, your ICQ, your MSN messenger, and I'm just like, dude, who designed, how long have you guys been working on this thing? How long has Stadia been in development for the last 20 years? What's going on? But anyway, let's not even get too in-depth with that one. That was just a little funny thing that I thought I'd bring up of how ridiculously out of touch with the industry the people around Stadia are. But essentially, from a content creator's perspective, there was an upside for me from Google Stadia, and that was the fact that, there was supposed to be this button that you could just press when you're playing a game on Stadia, and it will start live streaming straight onto your YouTube channel. And this, for me, would have actually been a big deal. Because right now, in order for me to live stream anything, I'm going to need a capture card. I'm going to need a pretty decent PC that can handle the processing of the capture card, depending on the resolution that I'm sending out, depending on the quality that I'm sending out. And, there's always a lot of hardware limitations because this stuff is expensive. Just trying to get a 4K 60 FPS card, it's probably going to be, $300, something like that. Then having to still buy the PlayStation 5 that's coming out next year, that's going to be another $500 on top of that. And having a decent computer, there's a lot of stuff that costs a lot of money in order for you to actually be able to live stream at an acceptable quality. And the promise of Stadia is just nah, dude, you press one button, bam, 4K 60 FPS straight onto your YouTube channel. And I was like, dude, this is actually a really good thing for me from a content creator standpoint. So as much as the consumer side of me would be dude, I hope Stadia fails, the content creator side of me is dude, I just hope it survives. At this point, that's where I'm at because, right now there's not a lot of games that I would want to stream on Stadia, but you guys know how this stuff is. When the Switch came out, it also didn't have that many games, and now it probably has more games than all platforms combined. Although a lot of that is mobile trash, unfortunately, and nobody cares for mobile trash. But, I think there was potential for people eventually to start porting their games onto Google Stadia. But as it turns out, porting your games to Google Stadia might not be as easy as just putting them on another console. So essentially what Google Stadia is doing is putting a lot more pressure onto developers for them to develop another version of their video games. So now right now they're developing a version for PlayStation, developing a version for PC, developing a version for Xbox One, and now they're going to have to develop another one for Google Stadia. And there's a lot of games on Stadia that aren't actually running at 4K 60 FPS, which is something that a lot of people, I believe even Phil Harrison had like a tweet where he said like, oh yeah, totally, all games going to be running 4K 60 FPS at launch. And it's like, no. Your little Chromecast Ultra device is outputting those games at 4K 60 FPS, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are rendering at 4K 60 FPS. Now, I don't want to get too technical with this. This is why you guys should watch the Digital Foundry video. I'll probably link that in the pinned comment or in the description. You know, there's going to be a link somewhere down there to the video from Digital Foundry where they go in depth and they analyze everything in the best possible conditions that you could have for Google Stadia, which is not going to be the same thing that everybody's going to have because, you know, they've said you're going to be able to use this thing wireless. And according to Bellular, good luck using that thing wirelessly, dude. Just good friggin' luck. You better connect that thing with a cable, okay? Which pretty much means there's going to be a bit of a problem for a lot of cell phones. Again, depending on the quality of your Wi-Fi, depending on how saturated your Wi-Fi environment is, which, you know, if you live in an apartment, you know how it usually goes. There's probably like 20, 30, 50 Wi-Fi signals going around, which probably means a lot of noise. You're not going to have the best bandwidth. There's all of these conditions that are working against Stadia. But even in the best possible conditions with like a dedicated hardline gigabit connection, there's still problems. There's still a lot of games that aren't running 4K 60 FPS, including even, apparently, according to, this is just something that I saw on the Digital Foundry video, apparently there was a performance mode on Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I'm like, now wait a minute. You guys specifically said in your Google Stadia video, no, our thing is better than the two current generation consoles combined. It's so powerful. Look at my teraflops. Look at the size of all my teraflops. Whatever happened to those 40K? Dude, if I'm getting Stadia, the main selling point of having Stadia for someone like me, for like someone who could be an early adopter, I mean, naturally, this thing's not in Portugal, so I can't early adopt it. But for someone who can be an early adopter, like these people that are adopting your product early right now, you know, those same people that you forgot to send codes to, because apparently Google Stadia also forgot to send codes to a lot of their founders, which is hilarious. Like, you can't even handle sending out a goddamn email. Like, what is wrong with you? But anyway, these are the people that want the best possible experience. And the promise of this is like, no, this is just max level visuals, max everything. And one of the things that we have to deal with due to having all of these best visuals being streamed at us is going to be the input latency. That's kind of like the downside. So you'd expect, okay, so I'm going to have a little bit of input latency. I think everybody that knows anything about streaming video games will be expecting the input latency. So you'd be like, okay, so I'll have this input latency, but the payoff is that I'm going to be playing everything at 4K 60 FPS. Not the case. And the input latency is actually pretty friggin' atrocious. Now, I remember when I was reacting to the stuff that they were talking about, because they were saying stuff like, oh, we're going to predict the buttons you're going to press. And I'm just like, oh, so you're going to have an AI play the game for me? Like, what the hell's going on there? So, but they were talking like a big game about how they were going to be able to predict user behavior, and they were going to be able to implement that into their latency algorithm. So they were going to create some, I think at some point they even referred to it as negative latency. And I was like, what? Negative latency? Dude, that's some serious AI sorcery you got going there. But as we all know from, you know, the experience that I personally have on YouTube, you know, Google's AI is usually not that bright. They tend to do a lot of mistakes, and naturally the input latency is pretty bad. Most people are reporting terrible input latency to the point where you can't even play a lot of the video games, even in the best possible conditions. This again from Bellular, he specifically said that, like, dude, we couldn't even play Destiny 2. They couldn't even play Destiny 2 on the best possible scenario. Again, your mileage is going to vary wildly depending on how far away you are from your local Google center, because the controller connects directly to Google. It doesn't connect to a console, which then connects to Google, because supposedly that is meant to eliminate some of the input latency, but doesn't appear to be working all that well for most people. So what do we have here? We have a product that launched. A lot of the founders of this product did not even receive their codes on the launch day. Probably, I'm assuming some people might have even not received their controllers or whatever. Doesn't really matter, because you could still play it on your PCs using like a DualShock 4 or an Xbox One controller via USB. It would still work. But a lot of people ended up not receiving it. A lot of the video games aren't running as well as it was promised. And Google was quick to basically send the developers under the bus. They're like, we're extremely proud of what developers were able to achieve on launch day, but basically the reason stuff isn't running at 4K 60 FPS, it's their fault. That's kind of like what they said in their article. There's some games that aren't there yet, and they're going to be patching them, and they're going to be fixing them. And I'm thinking to myself, do you actually believe what you are saying? Because like I said earlier, basically you're just adding another platform on top of all the work that a lot of developers have to do, because they can't just like port stuff straight into Stadia. It doesn't appear to be as easy, which is why we're having these situations with some of these games not running at 4K 60 FPS, because apparently they're not being able to tap into the whole potential of whatever hardware is running behind Google Stadia. And so what you are saying is that developers are going to have to spread their time between patching PS4 versions, PC versions, Xbox One X versions, potentially for some games, Nintendo Switch versions, and now Google Stadia versions as well. Do you actually believe that developers are going to prioritize the Google Stadia version of every game, considering how abysmal the launch of Google Stadia has been and how poorly it was received by the audience, with some of its most dedicated fans essentially turning on the service and saying that the service is not good? Like with all of this stuff going on, do you genuinely believe that developers are going to be supporting Google Stadia in the long run? I personally have a lot of doubts in regards to that. Not to mention that I, as a consumer, I'm already biased against this product to begin with, and this terrible launch experience that you provided for everyone just made me even more, more negative towards it. Because here's the thing. What you are promising with Google Stadia, in a lot of ways, I'm already doing with my PlayStation 4 Pro. You guys are like, what? What are you talking about? Well, PlayStation 4 Pro already has remote play, and I know it's not the best thing ever, but you know what's really good about it is that when the streaming portion of it isn't working, I know that I don't have to worry too much about it, because I can just pick up the PS4 and play it myself. I can just go to the location where the PS4 is, and I can play it. There's always that fallback. Even if I'm like on vacation or something, I'm like, oh man, this thing's not working. What's going on here? By the time I come back home, I can play it again. I know for a fact there's not going to be a situation, well, unless the PS4 breaks, but that's on me. The hardware is there. And it's just like, to have that fallback is a much better experience. So this is the reason why I bought this specific Xperia phone. Back when I needed to get a phone, I got a Sony Xperia, because I was going to be able to play PS4 on it. And I've played Destiny 2 on this phone. I've played Final Fantasy 14 on this phone. And yeah, there's input delay, which I would have expected. But here's the thing. I'm not paying a subscription. I wasn't promised 4K 60 FPS. They just said, hey, we're going to put this thing out there. Initially, it was only going to work for the PlayStation Vita, but they eventually extended it to Sony phones. Now I believe they've also extended it again it now supports Apple phones as well. And it's also been expanded to the point where it supports Macs, it supports PCs. As a matter of fact, I've played a lot of times because I leave the console in the hotel and I go home, and a lot of times I've played video games from the PC, and the latency on the PC is actually not bad at all. It's surprisingly good. And I've played Monster Hunter on there. I've played Anthem on there. I've played a lot of the titles that I have on PS4. Probably the only thing that I haven't played is Elite Dangerous, because there's no way to hook up my HOTAS remotely. That's something they still have to do. Or maybe there is a way. I don't know. Either way, haven't tested that stuff all that much. But yeah, what I'm saying is that the promise of Google Stadia is already being implemented by PlayStation 4. And naturally, what a lot of people have been talking about is the xCloud service of Xbox, which is apparently going to be infinitely superior. It gives you your whole Xbox experience right there. And you have all the games that you already have on your Xbox. And on top of it, Xbox has naturally the Games Pass service that they are using, which I actually have a friend of mine, which surprisingly actually bought an Xbox to make use of the Games Pass service, and he's super happy about it because, you know, they got a ton of games access and all of that stuff. It's not really something that I'm ready to embrace just yet, the Games Pass thing. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's a fantastic thing, but I'm not ready to embrace it yet because I'm still attached in my old ways. And I'm like, no, I want to own my games. I don't want them to be on a service. I don't want to consume video games the same way that I consume Netflix. And the way that I'm looking at this is that if we get into a situation where we go from having the Netflix, which I would say currently Netflix is the Xbox Game Pass, we'll eventually get to a situation where we have Netflix, HBO, Hulu, Disney Plus, and all of the other services that you have. And, you know, that's going to be probably each publisher will have their own streaming service, not streaming, their own like Games Pass type service. Like we already have the Electronic Arts one, which is Origin Access Premiere, whatever it's called. I believe that Ubisoft is launching one, or they already launched one. I'm assuming that if Epic Games doesn't have one yet, they'll have one soon. So that's kind of the situation that we're going to get into, which is why I still would rather pick and choose the games that I want to play, as opposed to like, oh no, I'm going to sign up for this service and that service and the other service. And then eventually these games, they kind of rotate. So eventually they'll go out of the service and another game will come in. And I'm like, what if I was playing that game? It blows me away. But that's the other thing. Because like I would figure the use case for Google Stadia would be a service like that where you rent your games. It makes a lot more sense because what do you actually own when you're paying $60 for a game on Google Stadia? You own nothing. You own zero. Google probably has a clause in their contract that says, hey, at any point we can shut this shit down and there's nothing you can do about it. I would not be surprised one bit. But that's just the way it is. But to all of the people that are surprised about the fact that Google lied about a lot of the features of Google Stadia, haven't you been paying attention to your YouTube content creators? Like, Google lies all the time. Like, here's a very easy example. When Google tells its content creators, they're like, oh, yeah, when a video gets demonetized, yeah, that doesn't affect your discoverability at all. Ask any content creator you know that's had a video demonetized to go take a look at their analytics of when the video was demonetized. You'll see what the result is. Your video dips like, there's like a wall. Like your video's doing like this. Maybe it's climbing, maybe it's lowering, maybe it's maintaining. The moment it gets demonetized, crash and burn. Video might as well not exist. Because let me tell you how Google operates. If it ain't making us money, we ain't interested in promoting it. That's exactly how it is. Like I remember at one point when I did a sponsorship, I felt like, okay, I'm getting a lot for this sponsorship, so I'm not going to put ads on the video. Dude, that video did so bad, I had to do another video to compensate the people sponsoring me because I was just like, okay, I'm going to just do another video for your stuff because this video just like tanked so bad due to the simple fact that I chose not to monetize it. And that's how every piece of content works on YouTube. And that's why I'm telling you, YouTube lies, YouTube is Google, Google lies. That's just the way it goes. And it's like, if you have data caps, forget about Google Stadia. It's not even a valid option for you. Just forget about it. I think Google Stadia was just like such a massive mess from the inception even. Because they couldn't even deliver, I think, almost on anything. To the very few people that are enjoying Google Stadia, by the way, don't feel discouraged. Like, enjoy your product. You paid for it. Enjoy it, and I hope it works well. As a matter of fact, like I said, as a content creator, I hope that Google turns it around. Because I want to have that button that I can press to just stream a game 4K 60 FPS onto YouTube. Because it's a lot easier than me having to buy the hardware and having to deal with all the connections and stuff and, you know, potential hardware failure to do that stuff myself. But, you know, whatever the future holds, We will see, but those are my thoughts on Google Stadia. I'm extremely disappointed. They messed up. The consumer portion of me is actually like, yeah, fuck game streaming. I never liked it anyway. But anyway, that is going to be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button. If you didn't enjoy it, hit the dislike button because feedback is important. Feedback, which you can also leave in the comment section down below. If you usually enjoy my content, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon so that you'll receive the notifications. Thank you very much for watching. Stay strong, and may your shields never break.